Welcome to Women Winning Divorce with your host, Heather Quick. Heather brings over 20 years of law experience that advocates and empowers women to achieve happier and healthier lives. Each week, we provide knowledge and guidance on different aspects of family law to help lead women through the difficult and emotional legal challenges that they are facing. Listen in as she discusses issues including divorce, custody, alimony, paternity, narcissism, mediation, and other family law issues to provide insight on the journey of women winning divorce. Welcome to the show. I'm Julie Morgan, and I'm joined by your host, Heather Quick. Hi, Heather. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Julie.
Heather, today's topic, substance abuse. Tell me, is this something that you see often in your practice?
Yes, we do. And I would, and it's hard to say, is it just people talk about it more now, in really the almost 20 years I've been doing family law, or is it just something now that is just more of an issue? That I can't answer, but yes, we see it a lot, and see a lot more cases of women with addiction problems as well than maybe I did, 10, 15 years ago.
Have they possibly shared what pushed them to that point? Because I was thinking that this was going to mostly be about substance abuse of the husband, the spouse.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it both sides. So it's one of those things that, obviously we like a lot of other things. It's not specific to socioeconomic or race, but even gender. The financial abuse, that's more something that is where that husband is dominating that aspect. From my perspective and from our practice, that's what we see. But we certainly have absolutely help women who are recovering or in the middle of it and trying to help them through that. And, the divorce is kind of the consequence. I don't know. It's an effect that in the substance abuse is an issue. So it's definitely something we've seen on both sides.
Mm. Do you try to help them with that if they want to accept help?
Oh, absolutely. And, my perspective and our point of view at our firm is, if you have a problem or had a problem, if you are in a position to acknowledge it and get help, then we can help you through this process. And I think that's a very honest, and the judges are going to look at that as, hey, I'm acknowledging this and I'm working through it. If you don't want help or want to work through it, I don't know that we're going to get the results for you that you would want. So that might not be a good fit, because if it's an issue, if it's not an issue in the divorce and then we don't know about it, it's not really something that's going to be addressed. But obviously, if your spouse has brought it up and you're worried about it, well, we will help you through that if you want to. And that's the thing. Or if you don't want help, but you just still need an attorney, we'll figure that out if we can align and still achieve the goals that you want, and maintain our integrity with how we would help you.
But really, that's the first step. You have to want to.
Oh, indeed. Oh, yeah. And I know we've touched, I think really just in the last show, just talking about denial, but denial is huge, huge in substance abuse. And addicts are manipulative individuals. And so, again, if they don't want help, and we could be on the receiving end of that as their attorney through the process. I'm certainly not going to say that hasn't happened. I just have had a lot of experience with it in this realm. So we do pick up on it. We do, kind of see what we're going on. But, if somebody is in a relationship with an addict, and we're going through the divorce with them, there's so many ways we can help them and prepare them for what they're seeing.
Mm. Now, you mentioned this, but I think it's worth mentioning again. This can happen to everyone. This is not just a certain type of person that may look a certain way or have a certain amount of money.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody, anybody, no one's immune. No one's immune to this. And it is one of, yeah, we've talked about so much stuff. So I'm not going to say it's the most, but like there's the psychology, which is involved when you have the substance abuse, is it's again another complex thing as to why somebody stays, and with a person that they know is an alcoholic with destructive behavior, or addicted to drugs, and they're turning into this different person, but yet it's complicated in a marriage. And I know I'm not an expert, or I certainly wouldn't speak on it, but we've all probably heard that codependency, and there's a lot to that, because there's that it interrelates. You're in this relationship with this person, you may not be the one who's abusing substances, but it's still, you're so intertwined with what they do and when, and it's complicated, to say the least.
Okay. You just took that to a different level, and I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah. Okay. But some people are so good at hiding it. They're just really, really good at hiding it, and you just would have never thought.
Agreed. And I think that, like in our case as the divorce attorneys, some things that we may hear is that the spouse, like, I didn't know. I really didn't know it was at this level until now we got to this point, and then learning it's been going on for years. So yes, it probably happens less. I mean, a lot of times I hear from women, oh yeah, I mean, it's been going on for years. I thought he'd gotten better, and maybe I thought he was sober for many years. So then they notice immediately if they're not sober, because they know this person. They knew them when they were, under the influence, and then maybe they had the opportunity where there was a sober period of time, and then it changes, and they know really quickly.
That's where it comes in when you talk about the fact that they can become an entirely different person.
Completely. I mean, and that, and this is a little deeper, but this may make sense for folks. And they're a completely different person as that addict, but you still remember the person they were, or the sober person, the person that you fell in love with. And there's just such a hope, because if they just stop this, which way easier said than done, but that's what they're thinking. And they're like, they have this ability. Maybe they're not like this 100% of the time at the moment. It's just, every few days, once a week, I don't know. But that sober person shows up, and they're like, oh, that's who they could be. So, but yes, they do. They go into, sometimes they're like the really happiest, funnest person to be around. Everybody loves them, or sometimes it can be very dark and angry. But either way, it's when it goes to the excess that anyone listening who understands it, they know that, right? They know. They're like, I know, like, he's been, maybe fun at the party, but come home, drinks even more, passes out, in the middle of the floor, or, ends up staying somewhere else, or there's just, all of those things that they know that is, that different person that they become. And there's a lot of responsibility on the spouse who's not the addict in those cases.
And you know what? Let's back up just a little bit. Something I thought about is substance abuse. It's anything extra. So it can be alcohol, it can be pills, it can be anything extra that the person is taking.
Oh, absolutely. Because, yeah, it's prescription pills. But again, that's why the word abuse is in there. Because, okay, alcohol is legal, but then there's a level, there's a line as to when it's abuse. Your one glass of wine every night, that's not abuse. It's something else, or it's those excesses. And when you're in it, and you know that other person goes to those extremes. And Um, it it's even the prescription pills that can then so dangerously carry over to, so they're legal, you're legally prescribed, but you're not taking them as directed.
Hmm. So if you're looking for signs of this, it can be anything that's in excess. Yeah.
Really
Mm.
is.
And how does this correlate with domestic violence? I know there has to be a correlation.
Well, I always come prepared with a little bit of statistics, a little number here and there, but 75% of domestic violence abuse is related to the use of alcohol and or drugs. And that is not to say that it is the drugs and alcohol that cause that, because I don't believe that. I believe it just can create a more dangerous situation. It can create things to escalate in a way that maybe they wouldn't escalate without it, but it doesn't mean every single time that there's abuse, someone's under the influence, but often, and it's definitely highly correlated. Certainly, most of the police reports, at any time that the cops get called out to that, there's going to be an indication of alcohol or drugs.
So you're saying that this is just something that may bring out something that's already there.
I believe so. I don't think that alcohol. I think it changes the way we behave because we're not willing to follow or accept our normal boundaries of how we will. But it absolutely, I mean, it does change your brain chemistry and over time, and you're more reckless. You're more willing to take risks. That's why so many people drunk driving, and you're more, you're more willing to take the risk. You're not appreciating that as much because it's affecting the way you think. So somebody who's never been abusive, just because they're an addict doesn't mean they're going to be. It just is in those situations. Maybe that is what really creates an increased in the situation, in the violence. There's something always underlying. I do believe that. And they might, you've heard, everybody's heard that term, like mean drunk. Okay, well, they're probably a mean person in there any now, not afraid to do those things.
Mm. You know, something I thought about, we talked about the fact that they can become an entirely different person. But what if you met them and they were an addict? So that is just who you know them as, and you don't even know it. You know what I mean?
And I think that happens a lot. I'm certain it does. Of course it does. And, you know, maybe, and it just depends. I'm not certainly, have my experiences with this as it relates to family law, but, I watch, movies just like you do, in documentaries, and, particularly say if it's pills that are stimulants or drugs that are stimulants. Um, a lot of people function and that's how they do that. And that's something you could probably hide a lot easier because alcohol is a depressant. And, so eventually, and there's the smell and all that. It's not going to put you at this exciting level of performance that certainly some drugs do. So I think very easily, or, and I say that about alcohol, but I certainly have heard stories of, and there's that term functioning alcoholic. So somebody just kind of has a baseline and maybe you don't, you've met them and you're not really aware until maybe you get married or live with the person and understand that level of alcohol that they're consuming. Because to you, that's the person you met. So you're not seeing the change, just to your
Hmm.
point.
Yeah. And then if they realize possibly in another area of their life that this is a problem and they try to get help and then they become an entirely different person because now they're off the drugs or alcohol, then you notice it.
And that could be somebody that you're like, wait, this isn't who I wanted to be in a relationship with, for sure. Correct. Yeah. I mean, so many ways that addiction affects marriages and relationships. And I think that's a very valid point. And, Julie, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like saying, now that you're sober, I don't know that I like you. That is okay. If you've known this person, now they may make you feel really bad, and you may be like, oh my God, if I leave them, then they're going to go drinking again. Well, no, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. You don't have that much control over another person. But I think that's a very interesting point.
Hmm. And I didn't think about it until just now. So, boy, I tell you.
You're so smart. You're so smart. You just think of all these things we got to talk about.
You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. We're taking a quick break here, and when we return, we're going to talk about the ways addiction affects a marriage. Stay with us. Welcome back to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, let's talk about the ways addiction affects a marriage. How can this disrupt the family dynamic? Because it can be disruptive. It has to be.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Of course it is. And, like other forms of abuse, there are many cases this happens gradually and over time. And it is something that, our word of the past couple weeks, denial, where there is denial. So you might kind of notice it, but you're letting it go because you don't really want to address, is this like a full-blown problem? And, and it's easy to make excuses for your spouse's behavior. And there's always so many reasons. So that's kind of where that codependency, you're covering for them with the kids, maybe with other family, and other events.
And then it just comes to a point where you can't ignore it.
Right, because it takes over. There becomes a point where they're so drunk and they pass out at the company party. And you're like, all right, now we got to do something. And now I can't sit by, and now I either got to leave or they got to get treatment, or, they've passed out and they're laying on the floor in the bathroom and I just woke up, and it's like, there's usually an aha, and it may take something even more drastic than that. Something finally is where you're like, okay, we got to do something. I can't ignore this anymore.
And that's at the point where now everybody knows. So you feel even more of a sense that, yeah, I got to do this. I got to do something about this, or he has to do something about this, or what have you. Because at that point, then everybody knows.
Correct. And that can be a powerful motivator, because there for a long, for many things, sometimes you can keep it hidden. But I think there becomes the point where it's too hard to ignore, or you don't want to ignore it anymore. You're just like, I just don't want to live like this, and I can't.
You don't want to ignore it anymore. Something to say about that. And addicts, they lie a lot.
They do. They lie and they lie and they lie. They're extremely manipulative, because that's how they have maneuvered to hide their addiction and make excuses for it, and really justify and avoid the fact they have a problem through manipulation. And it can be very hard for the spouse to see that. It's hard to acknowledge that, because in my experience, not across the board, in my experience, when this first comes to light, that, spouse, the wife, she's like, I still love him. So it's not like where we talk about some other things that they feel like they've been doing something to you. They're doing this to themselves, and you still love them, but you can't live like that. And so now we have that inner conflict, which is difficult. And that's why, and that creates, that has something to do with the codependency, but that's a big part of it. No, they haven't done anything to me, but they're killing themselves. They're destroying this. And it does eventually get to the point where it's affecting the family so much that even though maybe you weren't leaving for yourself, but the kids can't be in this environment anymore. And so you've got to leave, or got to kick them out. Do
Right.
something. You got to end the relationship. You can't live with this person anymore.
Because even if there's no domestic violence in as far as their abuse is concerned, because it's affecting everything around you. They lie about where they go, who they've been with, that type of thing. So it affects everything. So even if there's no domestic violence involved, you still feel like you need to leave at some point, possibly.
At some point, because it affects every part of your life. And, what we just talked about, they're manipulative and they lie, and you can't trust them. And that creates a lot of stress, but it feeds something in you that you're like, oh, are they home? What are they doing today? Where are they? I mean, it's sick all the way around. It really is. And it's very difficult for people to pull themselves out of this cycle and what was going on with that, to say, I have got to leave. Because you can make excuses as to why you can't leave with everything else. And this is no different.
So a substance abuser, what are some of their thoughts? What are some of their feelings about what they're doing?
They're very self-absorbed because it's all about them. And I think it gets to a point where their thoughts are consumed by, when do I have that next drink? When do I do drugs again? It's all consuming. When it gets to the level we're talking about, it's all consuming for that person. And there is that also very much that cognitive dissonance, and the internal struggle with, how am I going to get all this? But then if they're still keeping things together, like they're working, or they're trying to manage basically two different people. Their person that they pretend to be for the family spouse, and then this addiction that is on the other side. So it's exhausting. So then, as far as their behavior, they aren't very rational and they're not thinking straight. And every decision they're making, it's the drugs and alcohol are the what is behind it. So if they're going to work, it's just to make sure they have the money for that. If they're coming home, it's just because that's where I can drink and then not drive and nobody will bother me. Or, whatever they're doing, that's the primary thing. I mean, that's who they're married to, those
Mm.
substances. It's not you. It's not you. They're not thinking about your kids. They're not thinking about anything else but this, the substances, the drugs and alcohol, or alcohol.
So they'll empty bank accounts. They'll sell stuff in the home, and that has a real effect on life.
Yes, and that's despite what, I mean, think about what can happen to you if they, kill somebody, get in an accident, like, then financially you're both your worlds, because those assets, those things are under, you may have some liability. You're going to certainly be affected by it. But yes, they will steal right out from under you, steal from their kids, steal from from your kids, and because they're operating just at dishonesty. I mean, that's just where they're operating, because they have to feed this problem that they have. So honesty does not come into the picture at all.
I think about this and, empty bank accounts, that's just one thing. That right there alone can lead to so much more. You don't have money for food, you don't have money to pay the mortgage, you don't have this, you don't have that, because like we said in the show last week, money makes the world go round, right? And so
Right.
this one thing leads to so many other things.
It does. And, eventually there is going to be that event that is going to cause you to say, I'm done. I'm over this. Like we talked, it could be, losing control at a party. The thing that says to you, hey, I'm not ignoring this anymore. And that could be, he emptied the bank account. We had a savings account. He went in and took the kids' college money. Whatever it is, that then now that pain is worse than potentially the pain of actually doing something, that fear that keeps you from doing something. And now that, that has really put you over the edge. And of course, that's going to affect you as the sober person trying to keep it all together. You're working, anything you're doing. How do you not think about that? or wonder where he is or what's he doing and what bomb is going to drop today
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they're so unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. The domino effect is real, very real. How does this affect the children? You mentioned children earlier. This has to really just really be a dark spot in their life.
Well, indeed. And I'm going to talk about two different things because this has, in my experience, I've had this happen and people don't think about it. Okay. So here, you're as the spouse, like I'm keeping things together, keeping our family together. But he's got a real problem and he's a drunk. Well, now I got to go to work. He's here with the kids. There have been instances where the Department of Children and Families can come in and guess what? Accuse you of failing to protect your children because you have not protected them from this person. You've left him in charge of your kids and he is a drunk. And now kids got to go be with grandma because you're picking your husband over the kids because he's a danger. Now, is that extreme, Julie? Yes, it is. But I have witnessed it and I know it happens. And, it's good to hear sometimes an extreme just to say, oh, wow, that could really happen. And the children could be in a situation where, yeah, your spouse is driving, they're under the influence. Guess what? He's going to jail and your kids are riding in a cop car. And not for a fun, birthday party with the lights. Like that's going to be with them for a long time. And if you're fortunate enough that they're safe and nothing horrible happened, which we know that happens all the time. I mean, that it's always the sober people, the innocent victims that end up really dying, unfortunately, with drunk drivers more often than not. And that's on that alcohol side. Once you get into drugs, paraphernalia around, who are they dealing with? And your children are going to see that or be exposed to it, and that will last for them. I know I don't have statistics on that, but I do know that, children of parents who are addicts, there's going to be a higher percentage that they will have that problem too.
So you think about all of that you just mentioned. And if something happens and they, for lack of a better term, catch a case. And so then you have to deal with the legal bills. And so they lost their job. You were working, you had to leave the kids with them. Now you don't have the kids, you have these legal bills that you have to deal with. You may not have a safe place to stay because, they didn't pay the mortgage or what have you. And it really is a domino effect.
It is. And it sounds so dire, but it just one after another. It can very much happen without a doubt. And it's just, you can at least extricate yourself. If your husband, your spouse, significant other, if they're going down this path, they're going. You don't have control over anyone but your own actions. And you will, you can choose to be along for that ride or not. But if they don't want to get help and they don't get help, just these types of things that we're talking about will continue to happen.
And something else you mentioned as far as the kids are concerned, you've seen, and I'm asking you this question, and I know you can't answer certain things, but there are cases where she may choose the husband as opposed to the kids.
I'm sure it's possible. I haven't had specific, I don't think I've had a specific experience with that, but certainly. Yeah. And that could, you never know. There's just, because it's so dysfunctional. Substance abuse doesn't affect one person. There's the one abuser, but it affects the entire family. And nobody makes great decisions because of the many things that are going on in that house that just creates such chaos all the time.
So many layers to this. You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. We're taking a quick break here, and when we return, we're going to talk about divorcing a substance abuser. Stay with us. Welcome back to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, is it complicated as far as divorce is concerned to divorce someone who is a substance abuser?
Yeah, it adds another layer and a different layer because a little of what I've talked about before is that, our client trying to divorce their husband who's an alcoholic. And I'm just going to use that because then that's just easier. They're saying he's not doing anything to me, but I don't want to be with this person. So I think sometimes they emotionally still kind of go back and forth a little bit. And depending on how long they've been in that dysfunctional relationship, and or if they're really still very angry about it, rightfully so, they want to tell the court, all the reasons as far as, their alcohol and drug problem and or, but, Florida's a no fault state. So there may not be an opportunity for that to be addressed. And that can be stressful sometimes, or, they just are upset that, that they're not, it doesn't come into play. So like, well, I would stay married if you'd be sober. So that's his fault. He should pay more. It doesn't quite work like that.
Oh, okay. So wait a minute. Okay. So if someone is a substance abuser, do you have to prove that?
No. Now, there may be instances where it would be relevant. So we would have that conversation, but no, because you don't, the character of your spouse when you're divorcing is really irrelevant. You don't have to prove it in order to get a divorce. Now, if the fact that they are an addict of some sort may affect things in the divorce, like they've spent a lot of money or incurred debt, or of course the children, then there are reasons to go into it.
Okay. So it's not something that the judge is saying, okay, substance abuser, that's bad, then, this really has a strong bearing on the divorce. It's other things, those extra things like dealing with the kids that this really has to do with.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Hmm. What about marital property and assets? I mean, does it
In this
matter?
one, well, and again, that one's, it depends. I mean, we in Florida, um, equitable distribution is how, property and assets are handled. And, especially with marital property, if it's determined to be marital, even though he spent all his money, you've been saving yours, we've talked about that, it's still half his as the kind of beginning premise. But if, and this is a big if, like, can we prove that they have spent all this money, obviously on things that were not for the benefit of the marriage, for habit, there may be an opportunity. It's a real, like, I don't want to give anybody hope, like, oh, okay, this is what we're going to go do. All this money he's paid his drug dealer, or all the money he spent in the liquor store, we're going to recoup. Not necessarily, but I think it's definitely relevant. So you absolutely tell your attorney, and then we look at that, like, well, for example, you've been in this marriage, however long you've been in the marriage, and this has been going on for 5 years, the court's gonna be like, you stuck around, but if we could show maybe just a year kind of closer in time to you taking action, maybe an opportunity. But that's certainly not a guarantee or slam dunk, but the law, we can look at different ways depending, and particularly if there's been illegal things going on, that would give us more of a case for that.
And you know what? I'm thinking about this. I'm pretty sure there's someone out there who possibly feels like, yeah, this is a slam dunk for this because they use drugs. So I got to go.
Yeah. Wait till I tell the judge, da, 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 all things they did. And that doesn't really, that's not the opportunity there. That's for counseling and maybe another mediation, but it's just not always going to come into play.
Hmm. All right. Okay. I wasn't expecting you to say that.
I know you were. I know. That's why we're doing the show, right?
Yeah, because I know I'm not the only one who has these thoughts, right? Can't be, can't be. I'm not alone on this island. All right. Alimony payments. What about that? Does it have a bearing on that?
It can and can't. Like, like let's say, and this is something, I mean, you've lived with this person for so long and say now you're the only one working. And you're like, what? I'm going to have to pay alimony? Well, maybe. Like, we need to
Whoa,
look at that.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, hold on. Okay. No, no, Heather. No, no, that's not what I meant.
I know, but that's what I've got to tell you.
Okay, Heather, no, 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 no. Let's go back. That's not what I meant. I meant him paying alimony.
Well, and okay, let's think about this. Okay, Julie, listen. Now, I have, okay, he's an alcoholic, but let's say he's functioning and he works. Okay, well, then how much do we address the problem? And he goes, oops, I got to go to rehab. I can't pay you. Which, as
Mhm.
you know, will not be surprised that that has happened more than once. So that's a complicated question because, like I said, like, what if the wife, is the one working? What if he is working and now it's like, well, now I need to go to rehab. I can't earn money. Maybe, but he needs to then, he's going to have certainly income imputed to him, but that gets complicated.
Heather, why did you give me an answer I didn't want to hear?
I
She's
know,
like,
and I'm so sorry because I try to give you the all the answers, but I know it because it makes you think and you just look at it differently because none of this is really black and white. That at the end of the day is why you got to talk to a divorce attorney because there are so many different ways to go at that very straightforward question that could be outcomes, and so and it's not. You got to get advice based on your particular facts because many different things, can happen with that.
hmm. So I could end up paying him alimony because he wasn't working. He lost his job and possibly he can't work now because, like you said, he's going to rehab. And now I need to pay him alimony because I'm the one working.
A possibility. Now, Julie, I would never let that happen to you. We would fight very hard. But I am telling you, yes, like those things can happen. And in situations where we've had that conversation, the women were just as appalled and shocked as you are. Now, obviously spending all their money on alcohol and they could work and things like that. There's a lot of things that come into it, but it's worth thinking about. If like you're in this situation, the more likely it is that could be even after divorce. So it's just hopefully get people thinking about this.
The longer you support him, the longer you may have to support him. Oh my
Indeed.
goodness. Oh my goodness, Heather. Okay. Child custody. You mentioned this is probably the biggest place for substance abuse where it has a bearing in divorce.
Correct. This is a big issue that
Mm.
this will be the issue that makes it relevant. And this is when it has to go before the judge because you're going to have a concern. And I have heard from women before, but if we divorce, when the kids go with them, they won't be safe because of this problem. Very, very valid concern. There is no doubt because now you don't know what's going on in that house versus at least when you're there. But it's also the impact on your children. I believe you just have to, you're letting them know, well, this is okay. And you cover this up and you don't, leave somebody who is in this situation. And the courts they can do a lot. And this is one of the areas where I do see the courts in our areas take pretty bold steps to protect children in ways that, if random drug testing will be required. They have these breathalyzers that are actually like connected to an app on an iPad. And it's not perfect as nothing is. However, there's quite a few safeguards that the courts can impose in a divorce, on your spouse who has a problem. We do have to prove it. So
I think about this and I say, this may be a situation where you feel like, I don't want my kids to feel bad about this, so I don't want to say anything. I don't want um, other people to know, so I don't want to say anything. But really, in terms of child custody, you really need to say something.
You absolutely do, because this isn't something that you can hold back and talk about later. Like, if this is existing, you're going to have to address it, because if it's real, it's real. And that would be a concern with you with the kids versus if it's not. And yeah, it may be embarrassing, but he'll probably act as if it never happened and you're crazy and fight you on it potentially. So it's one of those things. And sometimes in the initial divorce, maybe it doesn't come up. Maybe there wasn't enough to prove it. We've certainly gone back on cases post divorce and you knew this was going on, and we've been able to have enough evidence to have the judge implement these kinds of safety measures. So, if it's an issue, you should absolutely tell your attorney and absolutely be prepared to put your children above his potential embarrassment.
Mm. Okay, so let's go back to the child custody and time sharing show that we did. If you want to listen to this, you can go to our website, womenwinningdivorce.com, to listen and download that episode. Could this be a time where, there could be an adjustment to the time sharing when, if you figured this out, if the person may, have a substance abuse problem even after the divorce, and this is a time that you could change the parameters of the time sharing?
Potentially, it's harder when you don't live in the house. So, like, what do you have? And it's more difficult. Now, if when you were married and they did have a problem, a spouse knows, and usually even on the phone, when they've been, in a relationship with somebody, they'll say, I can tell there's a change in the voice. Like, I know on a phone call if they've been drinking. That's the kind of evidence you need. And the court, you got to have enough for the court to order testing on both people. Alcohol, there are some tests that can show excessive alcohol abuse. So that is really takes. And then the court will order either supervision of the kids, maybe he has to get substance abuse evaluation, maybe some treatment, maybe just breathalyzer, because they're like, hey, when they don't have the kids, they can do what they want. But, when they're going to have the children, want to know they're sober. So again, there can be a spectrum of behavior. So it can get very extreme to somewhat mild. And that's where the facts of your particular case come into play. And hey, what evidence do we have to get before a judge? And is it enough?
Okay, okay, because I know we talked about the fact that those things, they're difficult to change. They're difficult to update that agreement.
Correct.
Okay, all
There,
right.
yeah, and so it's not just an easy, oh, they were out at the bar last weekend. No, I mean, it's in order to make a change, it's gonna have to rise to the level where those children are in danger.
Don't lie and say that this is happening when it's not really happening.
Correct. Correct. It's yes, because that's only gonna come back to harm you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
And we don't
you
lie in court. You're under oath.
right. And your lawyer will not agree with any of that. I know
That
she
is
won't.
correct.
Heather, is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic?
If you are in this situation, there is no judgment in our office, and you think want to move forward with the divorce. If you're worried that maybe you've had some issues in the past and that you're afraid to move forward with a divorce because he's going to bring it up. Well, I understand that, but call us, talk to someone in our office and let us really tell you what we really think will happen based on our experience in years, so that you're not just wondering in your head and sometimes afraid to take that move. And, these issues of substance abuse, they don't get better on their own. They don't. And so I would just encourage anybody going through this or knowing someone to reach out and let us help you through this process.
Yeah, this is another situation where it doesn't hurt to ask. Ask the question.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Heather, it was good to see you again.
It was great to see you as well. Thank you so much as always.
Thank you for listening to Women Winning Divorce. We hope you found information to help you navigate your divorce. If you like our show, please take the time to subscribe and provide a 5-star review. If you need more information, please visit our website at womenwinningdivorce.com, where you will find previous episodes and other helpful content. Join us next week as we continue our journey of women winning divorce.
Tobacco-Free Florida knows how hard it is to quit nicotine, which is why we offer different quit options to choose from for free, like 24/7 quit coaches available over the phone and free 2-week starter kits of quit aids. We're even experimenting with 80s pop music.
I'm giving you up, giving you up, giving you up, yeah. I'm letting you never come back to smoke. I'll never come back to smoke. I'll never come back. I'm giving you up.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com or call 1-877-U